Hello. It's really lovely to see everyone here today. This is so exciting. All the formalities around this day make it feel strangely kind of like a wedding. Agonizing over the right outfit, of course, the right shoes, having the support from my fantastic paronyms, all the fanfare, and being the center of attention. I actually really love it. And I'm so thankful that you've all joined me to share this big moment today. I often joke that I became a lawyer because I'm not a numbers person. Entirely on brand. I realized just last week that I even got the defense date wrong on the title page of this big, beautiful book. An unexpectedly honest illustration of my argument about the limits of reducing complex human realities to neat and tidy numbers. More on that soon. But first, no matter your background, it's hard to have missed recent developments in international law. From the brazen kidnapping of Venezuela's presidents, to threats to take Greenland, to tariffs, sanctions and force used as tools of bullying, we're seeing a troubling pattern. Might threatens once again to be presented as the only thing that makes right. These developments have led many to ask whether international law means anything anymore. I get why it can feel like a terrible time to be an international lawyer, but I also believe the opposite. There's never been a more important moment for this work, and this PhD is an attempt to help turn that story around, to, quite literally, make international law great again. I love this, it's so good. And I didn't even pay you to clap at that one, that's great. All right. This conviction, of course, is deeply personal. My career as an American-trained lawyer began during the early years of the global war on terror, unfolding alongside US interventions that continue today. That mix of the personal and professional lies at the heart of this manuscript. I was drawn into this work as I watched my country engage in what I can most politely only call creative lawyering, finding loopholes and workarounds that hollowed out the international protections built after the Second World War, when the world promised never again. These legal maneuvers were increasingly paired with a new way of waging war, remotely, with soldiers far from where lethal force was used. From places like Creech Air Force Base outside Las Vegas, pilots sit behind screens, observing, orienting, deciding, and acting, dropping bombs half a world away in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and now Venezuela, maybe Iran or Greenland next. Life-ending violence enabled by cutting-edge technology deployed a great distance from the people it most affects. This remoteness, made possible by armed drones or unpiloted aircraft equipped to observe, gather information, and even drop bombs, pulled me deeper into this work. For nearly 2 decades, these systems were described as precise, surgical, efficient, while the realities on the ground told a different story. Civilian harm grew, transparency was lacking, accountability was missing. The legal framework was stretched to its limits. But claims of illegality alone didn't change state behavior. And as an international lawyer, I couldn't help but ask, why? In a small blow to my international lawyer's ego, it turns out law, of course, wasn't the only consideration during these operations. That realization made me rethink my approach, shifting the focus from legality to legitimacy. The shift changed everything. It brought new voices into the conversation, encouraged military operators to lean in rather than to tune out. It brought civil society, academics, defense ministries to the same table for meaningful dialogue. In short, it opened space for research, conversation, and real change. In late 2023, I launched this research project in earnest. I wanted to explore how new forms of AI-enabled warfare connect to the earlier iterations of remote operations and how both challenge the legitimacy of military targeting. To do this, I examined legal and military doctrine, studied literature and operational contexts. I spoke with operators, commanders, diplomats, policymakers, academics, and representatives from conflict-affected communities. Like the drones before them, these AI systems are marketed as precise, surgical, efficient, and man, they are fast, sometimes blindingly so. Even my own research picked up pace after co-authoring a blog post entitled "The Need for Speed." And yes, all Tom Cruise jokes intended. You're welcome. During this time, we collectively moved from hypothetical debates on military AI systems to observing their real-world effects in Gaza and Ukraine. But we see common threads. All those layers of distance, from the physical, psychological, epistemic, they raise familiar concerns. If earlier claims of precision went largely unchecked in remote warfare, I had to ask what happens when speed and scale increase dramatically. Gaza offers one troubling answer: precision in targeting only if one takes that to mean destroying precisely everything. Despite all the talk of efficiency and operational speed, one issue keeps disappearing from view: civilian harm. The same patterns we saw with drones, utilitarian calculations, euphemisms like collateral damage, a quick glance at the screen, and then we move on. But I can't move on. This issue has shaped nearly 20 years of my career, and with current geopolitical realities, it's unlikely to go away. So, like any good academic, I read, questioned, debated, mapped ideas, pushed back on narratives, tested hypotheses, wrote, refined, discussed, refined again, and eventually, with feedback from a brilliant network, this book, written as a series of 5 academic articles, an introduction and conclusion, emerged. At the heart of it all is a simple yet extraordinarily complex question: what makes a military targeting operation legitimate, especially in light of increasing speed and scale afforded by AI-enabled systems? What I've found across all of my work are 4 core elements: respect for the rule of law, transparency, accountability, and protecting civilians from harm. The rule of law isn't just about following the rules on paper, but honoring the values and purpose behind them. Transparency means sharing clear, accurate, and timely information that people can actually understand. Accountability, broader than just law alone, builds on transparency and means there are real ways to respond when things go wrong, not only through courts, but just as importantly, other avenues. And at the heart of all of this is a basic idea: civilians should never be treated as fair game in war, and every serious effort must be made to keep them out of harm's way. In my first article, I look at how remote forms of warfare, especially the use of armed drones, are changing the way that wars are fought and how civilians are seen and affected. I argue that fighting from a distance, often through data and technology, can make harm to civilians easier to overlook. And I call for a more human-centered approach to protecting civilians. In the next, I demonstrate that even though international laws were created to protect civilians during war, recent conflicts show how difficult this has become as warfare increasingly relies on technology and automated systems. When decisions are driven too much by data and efficiency, we risk losing important space for human judgment. In another piece, I examine how militaries seek to prevent harm to civilians and how different countries turn that responsibility into concrete policies and practices. By comparing the United Kingdom's approach with reforms here in the Netherlands following a deadly incident in Hawija, Iraq, I show how greater transparency, accountability, and engagement with civil society can both better protect civilians and strengthen trust in targeting operations. In the last 2 articles, I turn toward the way AI and autonomy are reshaping warfare. The first is an analysis of how the Israel Defense Forces have used AI tools to help decide where and who to strike, presenting these systems as neutral aids to human decision-making. I argue that the speed, scale, and hidden risks of these technologies can quietly undermine human judgment and civilian protection when it comes to taking precautions in attack, raising deeper questions about accountability and what it means to wage AI-enabled war. In a companion article, I examine how AI systems rely heavily on calculations and models to support proportionality assessments in targeting, and how that focus on numbers can subtly yet consequentially shape how humans think and decide in war. Echoing my earlier confession about not being a numbers person, I argue that human judgment, context, and responsibility, rather than quantification, must remain at the center of targeting decisions. I end the book by outlining several paths forward. More importantly, I pause to take stock of the moment we are in, an existential one, legally, technologically, geopolitically, and morally. Questions about what it means to be human and humane in war cannot be avoided. They take time to grapple with. Deliberation, discussion, and diplomacy are slow by design because they require space to consider consequences. To rush or bypass these processes would be to give up some of our greatest human strengths and risk making irreversible, safety-critical decisions without the judgment, care, and responsibility that only humans are equipped to provide. My research has led me to this conclusion. As warfare becomes more technologically advanced, the need to keep our humanity at the center becomes more urgent, not less. International law was never meant to be a technical obstacle to innovation, but a moral commitment to restraint, dignity, and protection of the worst of human circumstances. If international law feels fragile today, it's not because it's failed, but because we are failing to take it seriously when it matters most. Making international law great again requires recommitting to those promises, insisting that even in an age of AI-enabled warfare, legality, legitimacy, and humanity remain non-negotiable. If you only take one thing from the discussion today, let it be this. If we allow speed, scale, and algorithms to eclipse human judgment, accountability, and care, we risk losing not only control over warfare, but something far more fundamental, our very humanity. Thank you.